Hello. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm in the middle of a fever dream, but I'm still very happy to be here. Yes, my name is Helena, and I want to be honest with you about the kind of speaker you've got in front of you today. I want to motivate you and inspire you to make amazing content and to build a really engaged online community. But I have to show you this. This is a grape. It's wearing a raspberry beard. I made it on a lunch break with leftover fruit from a photo shoot. I put it on Facebook. It got 146,000 likes, and it is statistically the most successful thing I have ever done in my career. I am not going to share very highbrow tips with you today. Most of what I'm going to say is very simple, but hopefully over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to show to you that if I can make online content, if I can build an engaged community, so can you. So as Phil was saying, I've done many things, but I spent most of my adult life mucking about on the internet for Innocent drinks. Now what Innocent does is this. They get fruit and veg, they crush it up, they put it into a bottle. That's it. Innocent as a brand does not really have any right to be interesting. It does not really have any right to build an engaged community. But over the years, they have built a brand that people really loved. And I'm going to spend the next few minutes telling you how they did that. Really what Innocent has done really well since 1999 when we first started making smoothies was talking to people. And the first place we talked to people was on our packaging. Now, on a bottle of smoothies, you have to include some things. You have to have a barcode. You have to have nutritionals. But there's also loads of blank space. Now, most brands use that space to talk about themselves. Innocent uses that space to do business speak bingo, or to give you something funny that you might be able to read if you're bored in a meeting or if you're commuting into the office. And so we use that to show people that not only are we going to give them a nice drink, but we're also going to try and entertain them too. And we don't just use the side of the packaging, we also use the underside of the packaging. So this is the bottom of a smoothie bottle. I did tell you it wasn't going to be highbrow. It says, "Stop looking at my bottom." Now, what's the point? Most people won't even see this. Maybe only 1 in 100 people will turn over the bottle because they're so bored to look at it, and they might see this message. But for that one person, they're going to understand something about Innocent. They're going to understand that we want to make you laugh and give you a bit more in your life, and we're a brand that has something quite interesting to say. So the first place we had was our packaging, and the second place was our office. Now this is our old office in Shepherd's Bush, and it's basically like a corrugated iron shed, this office. But we wanted to give it some personality when people came to look around. So we put these nice signs on the inside the building and on the front of the building. Now this is the front of the building, and above the front door it says people, and above the window it says burglars. And we were very proud of ourselves. We thought it was very funny until we got burgled through that window. And because we invited the burglars in with a sign, it invalidated our insurance. So we learned a very valuable lesson on that day. That's one of many mistakes I have made in my career. But when people come and visit the office, again, they understand something about Innocent as a brand, and it makes them connect more deeply with it. Now, in about 2005, 2006, we had our packaging, we had our office, and someone sent us an email, and they said, "I really like the words on your packaging, and I came to visit the office, and I really like that. Have you thought about writing a newsletter?" And we hadn't thought about writing a newsletter, but because somebody asked us to, we did start writing a newsletter. And on the first newsletter, we sent it out on a Friday in 2006 to 50 people. And in 2018, every Friday, we were sending that newsletter out to 500,000 people. And then after GDPR laws kicked in, back to 50 people again. But it was good while it lasted. And the thing with the newsletter is we hardly ever talk about juice or smoothies. I worked in juice and smoothies for about 8 years. Even I don't think it's that interesting. There's far more interesting things to talk about in the world. So what we do with the newsletter is we talk about what's happening. This is just before Christmas, so we talked about the fact that it's just before Christmas. And the idea of that is we give people content they actually want to read, and then when we do have something to sell, a product or a service, we put it in the middle, and people are far more likely, firstly, to open the email and read it. So we had our newsletter, we had our packaging, we had our office. Now when Twitter and Facebook and Instagram came along, it was just a natural place for us to be. It was the first time we could have two-way conversations with the people who were buying our stuff. We just got on it and saw what we could do. I'm not going to tell you we're great at it straight away. Here's an early example of one of our Facebook posts. Definitely would get you fired if you did that today. But we just started messing about. Nobody knew what we were up to. There wasn't the days in kind of 2007, 2008 when you weren't really monetizing those platforms. We just worked out what worked. We made a lot of mistakes like this, and we actually got quite good at it over the years. So I'm going to give you some tips about how to do customer service and social media well. And the first is to keep it personal. I'm a human. You are a human. You might work for an organization, but ultimately, It's just people talking to people. So if you can keep your customer service and your social media personal, people are far more likely to like it. And with customer service, the way that Innocent does this is if you want to get in touch with Innocent and we need to send you something in the post, maybe some vouchers, you will always get a handwritten card. You will never get an email and an e-coupon. You'll get a handwritten card written by an actual human, and you'll get a handwritten envelope. And a couple of years ago, Rio and our customer service team started doing these doodles on the envelopes. Now, these are not high art. They're not going to get into a gallery. But these are definitely done by a human who's taken an extra 30 seconds out of their day to draw a human at the beach flying a kite. And that means a lot to you when it comes through your envelope, when it comes through your door, because how often does anyone in your life send you handwritten cards, let alone a brand that might have disappointed you? So that's how we go over and above in customer service. And the tricky thing with social media is how do you do that? How do you make people feel that way when they open up the card written by a human? And the answer is it's hard. It's really difficult. You're talking to loads of people. You're trying to deal with serious things and not serious things all at the same time. There's a lot going on. But there are things you can do. And the fundamental basics are talk to people. Have conversations with people. Because if you talk to people like you're a human and they're a human, you will always get to a solution much quicker, and you will always build fans much quicker too. You can have serious conversations and you can have ridiculous conversations on the internet. And this is an example of a ridiculous conversation. This is a guy called Pete who got in touch on Twitter. I'm going to call it Twitter, not X, because I don't recognize X. It will always be Twitter to me, so I'm going to call it Twitter. Pete says, I do love Innocent Smoothies' Twitter account. Very refreshing, just like their smoothies. And we said, nicely done, Pete. Fancy a job. And we had a couple more tweets back and forth, nothing big. And then Pete gets in touch and says, my girlfriend is on to us. And this is a WhatsApp from his girlfriend saying, I feel like you're having a Twitter affair with Innocent Smoothies. Now, we could leave it there, or we could use it as an opportunity to have some fun. So I got back in touch and said, uh-oh, hold on, we can throw her off the scent. Give us a second. Thank you, consumer. Your business is important to us. Have a good day. That ought to do it. Pete gets back in touch. Bingo, she's none the wiser. Excellent, quick, to Paris. And then the girlfriend gets in touch. This is Gemma. She says, I'm watching you. Who asked? Nothing to see here, just a business-like conversation between friends. Pete, you're right, she's definitely on to us. What do we do? Pete says, this boat is sinking fast, abandon ship. Get back in touch and say, now's not the time to share our notebook with you, is it? And deface the notebook, all about how much I love Pete. Now, the thing is, for me, this was just a normal Tuesday. I was talking to lots of other people on Twitter at the time. It didn't make much of an impact on my life, to be honest. But for Pete and Gemma, it definitely had an impact. And I know this because Pete and Gemma would regularly send me photos of them drinking smoothies together. They sent me a photo of them drinking smoothies under the Eiffel Tower together. I feel like they're my friends. I feel like I've crossed several boundaries. But the point is that by having that conversation, Pete and Gemma are now Innocent fans for life, all from just taking the time to talk to them. So every conversation you have is an opportunity to build your organization or your brand from the ground up. And the thing when you talk to people is it's important to listen when they talk back. Organizations and brands are brilliant at talking at people. They are terrible at listening when they talk back. And it's really important you do that for loads of different reasons. And one of them is you can win people round. Not everybody's going to like what you do. Lots of people won't. But by taking the time to have conversations, some of them might become your fans. So this is just a normal kind of post. Every so often I would remember that my job was to sell smoothies, and so I would write something to tell people to buy them. And a guy called Daniel got in touch, and he said, if I didn't have to remortgage my house, I probably would. This is a common complaint with juices and smoothies. They're too expensive. That's the feedback that Dan is giving me in that instance. So my job is to try and win him back and see if I can do that. So we say, hello, Dan, if you could secure a mortgage for £4, you'll be able to pick up 2 cartons of smoothies from Sainsbury's right now. Daniel gets back in touch and said, you've made me look a right mug. Fair play. Obviously, we don't want people to feel like that, so we carried on. We like to see ourselves as mortgage brokers first, smoothie peddlers second. Dan says, as long as it's the right job for you, then that's okay. Be proud of who you are. You're beautiful. So things are going quite well at this point. Awkward hug. Yeah, but non-committal. Sure, whatever. So that conversation started with somebody saying, your drinks are too expensive, I'm not going to buy them. By the end, we're weirdly hugging on the internet. Now, it doesn't always go as well as that. Sometimes you will try and have that conversation, and people still won't like you at the end of it. And that's fine, but it's always worth taking the time to listen to people's feedback and trying to address it. And the thing when people give you feedback, it can impact business decisions in a way that you didn't expect. Something I didn't know before I started in the smoothie game is that lots of people either are allergic to bananas or hate bananas, just can't stand them. And when Innocent first started making smoothies, they didn't know that either. So all of our smoothies had bananas in them. But because so many people got in touch and said they hated bananas, we made a banana-free smoothie. No intention of ever doing that, but because that feedback came from our social media team into our organization, we made those changes. And for me, the best reason to listen to people when they talk is they will give you amazing ideas. Now, there's a day in January, you've probably heard of it, it's called Blue Monday, it's supposedly the bleakest day of the year. And every year we would write something on Facebook to remind people that it was just invented by somebody in marketing. It's not real, don't worry about it. But a guy called Paul got in touch and said, it's also Penguin Awareness Day, far more cheerful. And Paul is right, it's far more cheerful. And in my opinion, Penguin Awareness Day is the greatest day ever invented because it's completely unnecessary. We're all aware of penguins, they don't need any more awareness. So we thought, rather than focus on Blue Monday, let's just talk about penguins all day. So Innocent has an in-house design team, and within half an hour we say, today is Penguin Awareness Day, we're doing our bit, are you? And just to remind people that there are no penguins in any of our products. That's still true, there are no penguins in any Innocent products. And then on Twitter, we spent the whole day just making people aware of penguins. That's all we're doing, that's the sole objective, make people aware of penguins. And people were quite confused, we've started, it's really a public service, what we were doing. Boss Burgers got in touch and said, is this a penguin? No, that's a cow. It's a similar color, but it's actually a different animal. Gilbert Rugby got in touch and said, is this a penguin? Which, of course, not. It's actually shameless self-promotion on Gilbert Rugby's part. And when the police got in touch and said, is this a penguin? Of course it is a penguin, because whatever the police say goes. And so we just had fun. And you might say, yeah, okay, that's entertaining, but what's it got to do with penguins? What's it got to do with smoothies? Penguins, nothing. And I would say, you might go, it's good, but it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense for you to do that and spend your life doing that, which is a valid thing for you to say. But my response is, never underestimate the power of nonsense, because it works. On that day, 100,000 tweets were written about Penguin Awareness Day. We got 20,000 new followers on Twitter. We got 30,000 new fans on Facebook. We paid zero money in advertising. That's 50,000 people who didn't know that Innocent had a personality that suddenly were our fans. And so when we wanted to sell them something, we've got loads more people to talk to. And speaking of the hard sell, we've all got one. All of us here are selling something, a product or a service. And you've got to remember that fundamentally, that's what you're doing when you're talking to people and when you're making content. And sometimes that hard sell is hard, and it's not that interesting. If you have a bus and you have a new drink that's got sparkling water and fruit in it, sometimes you just have to write that on the side of the bus because you've got 2 seconds of people's attention. But when you're talking to people online, you do have a bit more time. Of course, it is hard to get people's attention, but if you can do far more interesting things. This is probably the most interesting thing I've managed to do with a bottle of juice before. So Innocent makes apple juice, Apple makes iPhones. When Apple releases a new iPhone, it's the biggest day on the internet all year. They live stream the product launch from California. There's millions of tweets, there's millions of Facebook and Instagram and TikToks all about the new iPhone. So when the iPhone 7 came out, on the exact time it came out on the Apple Live launch, we launched our Innocent 330ml. We completely ripped off an Apple ad. We shared the latest in Apple technology, and we flooded Twitter with our apple juice. And it went down really well, and Apple liked it. They did find it funny, but they said, if you do it again, we will sue you. So we took on board, we sent them a nice letter back, and then completely ignored them and did it again for the Apple Watch. And they said, please don't do it. We did it one more time with Apple Play, and then they did actually send me a cease and desist. So we did stop then. And you can't always do something as interesting as that. Innocent are very lucky. We make apple juice. They make iPhones. You can't always make the hard sell as connected as that. But if you're interested in what you're selling, other people will be too. So find a way to make it interesting for you. Fourth one, be topical, but be selective. Now, the reason I say these two things is it's important that we talk in the real world to people about things that matter to them. It's important that we're topical and we understand the context of where we're living. But we do not have to talk about everything. If you don't have a funny April Fool's idea, please don't share an April Fool's idea. Bad marketing is always worse than no marketing, is my opinion. So be selective and find the things that work for you. Now, for Innocent, what we tend to do is we will talk about Valentine's Day or Christmas maybe, but what we try and do is be selective and find the times when other people aren't talking. So for instance, the clocks change twice a year, and so we wrote a handy guide to changing your clocks. And the reason we do this is because it's a quintessential British thing that everyone talks about, the clocks changing, but also there's absolutely no competition. No other brands care about the clocks changing, so nobody talks about it. Whereas if you talk about April Fool's Day, you are competing with every other organisation on the planet. And these things we plan, so we know that the clocks are changing, so we plan this content. And sometimes we leave a lot of room in our calendar for unplanned content, so that we can be topical and so that we can react. And one of those times are elections. So Innocent is not a political organisation. We don't talk about partisan politics, but we are allowed to talk about elections. But on a general election while I was working at Innocent, we had nothing planned on that day and were told to give it a wide berth. But I went to vote on my way into work, and I saw a dog outside the polling station, and it gave me an idea. So I started the hashtag dogs at polling stations. And pretty quickly, people got involved. They started sending us their little fluffy dogs, their bigger fluffy dogs, their really big dogs. And within about an hour, it had gone quite insane. Loads of people were taking photos of their dogs at polling stations. People were planning to go and vote after work, so they went home to get their dog, to take them to the polling station, just so they could get involved in the hashtag. We started to make it into all of the UK press, the Wall Street Journal, and my favourite piece of coverage is the BBC News, and they've censored out a Lib Dem rosette that dog is wearing, clearly because they're worried about influencing the vote. And again, you might say, well, what's the point? And I would say, look at the results. It works. On a day that is quite bleak for lots of people, with an election, you have winners and you have losers. Dogs at polling stations is something that can unite people and give people a bit of joy on a day that isn't always that fun. And the results speak for themselves, 128 million impressions, all for dogs at polling stations. So if you have an opportunity to be topical, try and take it, because that is when you will really get noticed by loads more people. And my last tip, I can't take credit for this. This is an Innocent-wide mantra that has always really helped me, and it might help you too. It's if you're 70% sure, go for it. We use it across our business to help us make decisions. Because the idea is, you might think something is a good idea, but you never know for sure. You might be pretty sure it's a bad idea, so you want to wait until you're 70% on that cusp that you think it's a good idea, and as long as you're 70% sure, you go for it. And it started by a guy called New Adam. And the reason he's called New Adam is we already had an Adam, so we had to call him something else. And he started something called the Big Knit. You might have heard of this. It's where we get volunteers from around the world to gather up their spare scraps of wool, make us little hats. We put them on our bottles, we send them out, and we give the profits to Age UK. I think by now they've raised £5 million for Age UK by doing this over the years. It started in 2003 with Adam, who went to our founders and told them the idea, and they looked at him and they said, no. It's a terrible idea. No one's going to knit. No one's going to send the hats. They're all going to fall off the bottles. No one's going to want to buy them. It's going to be a waste of time. It's going to be a logistical nightmare. No. And Adam said, fine, give me a year to prove to you that this works. And if it doesn't, we won't do it again. So Adam did it in 2003, got 20,000 hats knitted for the Big Knit. The last time they ran it, they got 2 million hats knitted for the Big Knit, all because Adam had the confidence to push that idea through. And it doesn't just help with big ideas. We'll just go and show you this. It's not just a great charity exercise, it's a great comms exercise as well. Now, this is just one story. This is Grace, who knitted 50 hats for the Big Knit in 1 year. She would knit to keep her hands active. She would go to her local knitting group to keep up with her friends. It's a great thing for her, but also an incredible comms piece for us as well to share with people. And as I was saying, it's not just about the big ideas, it's not just about Grace and the Big Knit. It also helps us in other areas with 70% sure, because it allows us to make mistakes, especially on social media. You are going to make mistakes. I've made about 500 of them. So it really helps us do that. Now, this is just a small mistake. You probably can't see this. We put a typo, is a blend, is a blend. About 5 people proofread that. That should never have happened, but it didn't matter. It's a human error, and it did. And rather than shying away from it when somebody pointed it out to us, we just embrace our mistakes and try and make fewer of them every time. And I guess the craziest example from me of a 70% sure is when I found a stapler on the 4th floor of Fruit Towers in London. Now, on the stapler, there was a label that said, floor 4, do not remove. And I couldn't believe someone had taken the time to make a label for a stapler. So I thought it would be funny to nick the stapler and take it to the 2nd floor. And people liked it. So my colleague next to me was going punting in Cambridge that weekend, so I gave her the stapler. And people really liked that. And then we took it to a few more places, and then I was taking this photo outside the Ritz in London, and I heard somebody shout, oh my God, is that the 4th floor stapler? She ran across the road to have her photo taken with it. People were coming to our office just to visit the stapler. It was going insane by this point. Took it to the baseball in Boston, took it to Disney World, took it scuba diving, took it everywhere. We got into all of the UK press, all of whom quoted my age, which felt unnecessary. And it went fully viral on the internet. Again, nothing to do with smoothies, but loads of new fans all coming to us, all because we just took a stapler around the world. And because I thought, oh, that's a good idea, and I tried it out, all of this happened. So that's it from me. I think just to summarize, remember that you're a human. Remember that you're talking to humans. And if you're 70% sure that you've got a good idea, please do your best to give it a try. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helena. That was fab. Absolutely amazing. Has anybody got any questions for Helena? We've got this catchbox microphone. We've been dying to try it out, so we'll throw it at you. It is apparently soft. If the inside comes out and hits you, that might be a different thing. Any questions? Right. Okay, good. Thank you. And then you can chuck it to the next person. That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. Was there any periods in sort of the early years where you were kind of obviously establishing sort of this cheeky side of social media where, I don't know, the big bosses went, oh, we've got to get serious now, we're starting to make some money maybe, or we're starting to get some traction? Was it, we've got to calm this stuff down, and what was, if it was, what was your response?
So I was really lucky that Innocent was very supportive, and it was a brand that was built on pissing about, so like lucky in that sense, and I know that lots of people are not that lucky. They didn't really rein us in, but they didn't give us any money to advertise for probably the first 3 or 4 years that I was doing things. Then they realised it was working, and when they gave us more and more money to do the advertising, so as a proportion of our marketing spend, by the time I left, it was something like 70% digital, whereas when I started, it was zero, maybe £100. So the more money that came, the more focus there was on what we were doing, and people started saying things like ROI to me, which they never said before. So yeah, we were very lucky, but I think that is the question I get a lot, is how do you prove the ROI? And it is very difficult, but you have to think about the long game and community building. You just have to accept that you've got to maybe not make any money at first and do what you can. It's hard. I'm not sure if I answered your question there. Yeah.
Perfect, yeah, perfect.
Next one. Probably, I'll grab it off you and then we'll...
Oh, God.
Oh, good catch.
It's a risky strategy, this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I thought that was really, really inspiring. I was so taken back by your presentation, so thank you. My name's Ruth, and I actually work with the West Midlands Combined Authority on the Business Growth West Midlands platform. You won't be aware of it, but it's perfectly fine. Essentially, the platform's new, and we recently launched our service last week with a similar event like this. And essentially, because the platform's so new, and we're still kind of developing our voice, and I have an idea of what I want to do with the platform, but I feel like we can't fully have our cheeky side or our relatable side because we're still really early on. Mm-hmm. We still are really working on kind of growing the platform and having a lot of followers. So what would you suggest in terms of still having enough information on our platforms that attract the right kind of businesses and the right kind of audience, but also still staying really authentic and really personable and being really human? I feel like that was several questions in one, but I hope that makes a lot of sense.
I think I understand.
Okay.
I think you need to manage your expectations about what you're going to do, because when you're really new and you're thinking about your tone of voice and your brand personality, that does take a while to develop. And it might be that you've got the principles in place. It might be that you look back in a year and look at what you did now and think, God, that was awful, which is actually a good sign because it means you're developing. So what you don't want to do is have massive ambitions to have 1 million followers by the end of the year, if that's not realistic. Make sure your ambitions for what you can do are realistic, and in the interim, get good at what you do. So try things out. Make sure you're doing the basics well, but other than that, try things out. Like this presentation is 2 examples or 3 examples of things that went well, and in the background, there's thousands that were either mediocre, okay, a bit shit, or nearly got me fired, in between. So it's thinking about how you get good over time. So give yourself the space rather than having massive ambitions and then underachieving from what you want to do. So mess around and get good, basically.
Thank you so much. I sent you a LinkedIn request.
Oh, okay.
The other thing I would add to that is to tap up Sarah at the front, who's your customer success manager, So Sarah's written social strategies for lots of different organisations. She comes from the world of social media. She used to work at training companies for her sins. So, you know, I'm sure she would be more than willing to help you to, one, on your strategy, help you build that strategy, but also share with you what her other customers are doing that's been successful, because we've got quite a few combined authorities as customers. I think there's a couple of them in a room, actually, and perhaps have a chat with them about what they've done and what's worked as well. Cool. So, go on.
Hello, my name's Katie, and I just wanted to echo what was said there. That was really refreshing. I loved it, and it woke me up more than my coffee. Thank you. It was brilliant. So I work for an animal welfare charity and head up the social engagement for them, and it's a really hard balance because I like the cheeky stuff. I think it works really well. I totally agree with you. It's a personal thing. People want to buy into people. What advice would you give to someone in a situation where their brand identity is almost quite serious, but in order to break through that and get to and to show to, for example, heads of or whatever, that you need to be personable, what advice would you give to me and others, I guess?
Yeah, so I would say think about it as being human and not necessarily funny and not necessarily risk-taking. The innocent tone of voice is humorous, it's irreverent, it works for us, it's smoothies. We're in quite a safe realm. It might be that funny isn't right for your organisation. It might be that it is. I'm not saying you can't do it, but there's one thing of that. It's like you don't have to be funny.
Sorry, you're working. I'm just going to say it is, please. That's all right.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's like, so you don't have to. You think about human. When you're talking to your friends and they're going through something quite serious, you don't suddenly become formal. You still stay warm. You say, actually, you get more human, the more serious life gets. So just remember how you react to a human situation and try and do that as a brand. So that's the first thing, is that human. The thing I would say from working at the RSPB, which was my first experience of working in charity, is you can get away with more than you think. You start from a real place of risk, and we can't say anything. Actually, you can get away with a lot more than you think. That doesn't mean your line, your boundary of your red line, might be really different to a smoothie company, so you might not want to go as far, but you can push it, and that's where the 70% comes in. And the 70% is knowing everything you know about your brand and your organisation and what they're about and their values are all wrapped into that. That's how you make that 70% decision. It's not just what I fancy saying today. It's within my brand values, within what I want to achieve. I am 70% sure that this is okay. Then you go for it. And really, that's how you do it. And the way you do that is you have the right people doing your social who really understand your brand or your organisation, really understand your tone of voice, and then they're really able to make that 70% decision.
Okay,
Thank
one more.
you.
There's a lady right behind you to make the throw easy.
Hello.
And then there's a lady a couple of rows behind you that had a hand up. So.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that every interview I ever go for, I always reference innocent as my go-to.
Have you got any of the jobs, or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
I
good.
can
attest to that. I interviewed her, so
Wow,
she does.
great, amazing, thank you.
Thanks, Shane. I think it's behind you, yeah. I just want to go back to the comment about the charity as well. We have a lot of policing customers in Orlo, and what we see some of them do is, I think it's a balance here as well. It's not always being funny or always being serious. Patrick's nodding, who works at the NPCC and does a lot of work with police forces around their social media. So I think it's interspersing and topical as well. So picking your moment for those funny moments as well. So lots of the police forces obviously at times have huge incidents in their area or big, public crimes going on. You wouldn't be funny then, but perhaps when you've got a festival like Liverpool had the singing one. What's the singing one?
Eurovision.
That's it. When they had Eurovision, their tone of voice as Merseyside Police was different to when they had the awful murders earlier on in the year, right? So it's picking your time as well, I think, is a key one. Sorry, thank you.
I just want to say that was a really great presentation, like what everyone else has said. Just a quick question that's slightly similar to the last one. I work for a communications team at a council in the West Midlands, and we're not particularly well liked by our residents, maybe more so than some other councils. So on some of our channels, we are able to be a bit more fun if it's one of our more light-hearted channels. But on our main council channel, if we did want to be a bit more fun, how would you go about doing that, especially if we got backlash from some of our residents, which does happen sometimes?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I guess you can't please everyone, so you have to go into this knowing that some people just won't like you. They just won't. So when I was talking about winning people over, some of them are winnable and some of them aren't. Spend your energy on the winnable people and ignore the rest. So I would say don't let that stop you. but understand the context. If every time you post something, all you're doing is getting hate, I would say focus on your brilliant basics. And by that I mean probably your customer service, your one-on-one conversations. Because if you can win people around one-on-one, and I did give you two like specific examples, but those people do become your brand advocates, and they will stick up for you on kind of Facebook posts and comments. A lot of it is self-policed or not, you know, left to go feral. So what you want is to get some brand advocates in there. They're going to do the job for you, and you're going to start winning fans. And over time, you're going to have more fans than you're going to have detractors. So if it's not working, don't fight against the tide that isn't happening. But if you are getting some people who like what you do, and some people just don't like it, ignore them. Ignore those people. You can't win them over. Focus on the people that you can change their minds.
Thank you.
One of the things some of our other councils are doing in that area as well is using employee advocacy to counter that as well. So not always posting their content from just the main channels, but using their employees to spread the word as well. And maybe it arrives a bit softer from them than from the sort of member. I'm really sorry, I can see other people with their hands up, but we are sort of slightly behind on time after that wonderful presentation. Are you hanging around for the rest?
A little bit.
Yeah, so Helen's hanging around for a little bit, so first come, first served, I suppose it'll be. So if you've got more questions, especially if you're on the right side of the room, because you didn't really ask any, apart from that man there, all on the left side, then that'd be great. Just one more quick thing before we go. Thank you, Helena, for starting.